Okay guys, today is the day I compare two of my favorite cameras in the whole world to each other, easily the most used cameras on my channel. The full frame ZV-E1 with the same sensor as the FX6, FX3, and A7S III, and a whole lot of those features as well, versus the little ZV-E10 Mark II, a new release from Sony that has the same sensor as the FX30, so he is no slouch either. There is quite a difference in price and features, so let's talk about it. Now, in my handsome opinion, these two cameras are excellent values for the money, especially when it comes to video. They both share a lot in common because they are ZV cameras. After all, they are small and lightweight. They're easy to take around, easy to travel with. They have beginner-friendly modes like background defocus. They also have something called Cine Vlog, where you can just press a button and then it gives you those fake black bars that go over the top and the bottom, and then you can scroll through presets for those Cine Vlogs and make your footage just look cinematic coming straight out of camera. They are great for vertical content. As soon as you turn the camera, they will go into vertical video. No need to rotate in post. It just goes into your editor like that. The layout of the body is pretty much the same. Zoom rocker on the front. There is one extra custom button on the ZV-E1. They both have that great new microphone that comes with the ZV cameras and the little furry wind muff that comes as well on top, so that you don't even need to connect an external mic and you will still get pretty good audio. I personally like to connect an external mic anyway, but in a pinch, I have used these mics and they've actually worked really well. I will demonstrate that in this video. They have the same fully articulating screen of 1.09 million dots. This is a fully enabled touchscreen. In fact, you can control your settings just by swiping your finger on the LCD, which is great. And they have other modes as well, the same types of menus. They have focus breathing compensation. They have focus mapping, which I find I use a great deal. They have the very handy feature of product showcase mode. Just press the trash can button and then show a product to the screen and it will latch to it and then go right back to your pretty eyes. Now let's take a quick look side by side of these two cameras. This is in S-Log3, graded with the Leeming LUT, and as you can see, these have really, really nice images coming out of them. You will notice more background blur, of course, with the ZV-E1 using that 24mm G Master 1.4. That is an expensive lens, but it gives you that extra light coming in there so you can get that bigger background separation. Now, personally, I don't use that when I'm out. 1.4 is a little much in terms of that type of shot. It's just mush back there. I like to use more of an f2. But I did want to open up both these lenses to 1.4, the 15mm for the ZV-E10 Mark II and the 24 for the ZV-E1 to show you the difference in that background separation. Now this can be mitigated a little bit more. There are a lot of options with APS-C lenses. This one here from Viltrox, this is a 27mm f1.2. So now you have a 1.2. So in terms of background separation, that's equivalent to about an f1.8 full frame. So you can definitely get a very blurry background on your ZV-E10 Mark II if that's what you're looking for, depending on what lens you might want to buy. These things here, these Viltrox lenses, these are like G Master lenses for the APS-C lineup. Now, a lot of people will want to see what these cameras look like if you just take them out of the box, put them in all auto settings and press record. So I will show you that right now. Once again, both cameras do a great job. This is just intelligent auto. Took it out, let the camera do everything, the white balance, the aperture, the shutter speed, everything, and it looks really, really nice. Sony has come a long way with their colors and their skin tones, and I really, really like them now. Now, of course, because these cameras are marketed as content creation cameras and vlogging cameras, we have to take them out into the real world and bother our neighbors. So check this out. You're looking at the ZV-E10 Mark II with the 11mm 1.8 from Sony. This is definitely a good vlogging setup, one of the best that I can think of. I'm using the internal microphone as well, as you can hear, using the Don King wig up top, that little coif of hair there, make him look nice and handsome, just like his owner. Here you go, let's pick up the pace a little bit and see how that electronic stabilization does, because in all my tests, it's done really, really well. It doesn't have actual IBIS, just electronic stabe. And in fact, let's pick up the pace and run a little bit. See how that looks. How's it look? Does it look good? So right here we are on the ZV-E1 vlogging our gorgeous faces. Love the ZV-E1 because it has this dynamic active stabilization. You have a big lens, a wide lens I should say, like this 16-25 f2.8 from Sony. You just have a really good vlogging setup because the dynamic active stabilization crops in a nice bit, so you definitely want a wider lens. But look at this right here, such smooth footage. Looks great. Let's see, even if I pick up the pace here, then you will see it is still going quite smoothly. And I'm holding this out on a selfie stick, so it's not very perfectly balanced. Now let's go for a light little jog while I try not to have a heart attack. Here we go, jogging. Seriously, I'm already out of breath. That's not a good sign, is it? I just love the vlog footage that comes out of these two cameras. Of course, the ZV-E1, it has real IBIS, whereas the ZV-E10 Mark II has no IBIS system, no in-body image stabilization, and the ZV-E1 has that dynamic active stabilization. So the footage is definitely smoother on the ZV-E1, but I gotta say, for electronic-only stabilization, the ZV-E10 Mark II does a really good job. And don't forget, both of these cameras record gyro data to the SD card, so you can stabilize those in post. You don't even have to turn on any stabilization. Just crop in 3 or 4% and it comes out smooth as silk. Now, that does take a long time to render depending on your computer, and also it switches to 8-bit footage from 10-bit footage if you use the free program. If you upgrade to the paid Catalyst Prepare, you can do 10-bit footage, and also I think the free program GyroFlow will let you do the 10-bit footage as well. But personally, I just use the free one because my vlog footage doesn't look any different in 8-bit or 10-bit, to be honest. But I want to bring up something interesting when it comes to vlogging. Now, I say both cameras are small and lightweight, and they are, but when it comes to lenses, for vlogging you need a wider lens. And this 11mm from Sony, look at that, that is so small and light. That is great. And this is the 16-25 that I was using, and pretty much that's about the smallest wide lens that you can get for the Sony full frame system, and it's a 2.8. So this one here is a 1.8. So if you convert that to full frame depth of field, that is a 2.7. So basically the same amount of background blur. So you're not getting that full frame advantage in terms of background separation. And while not a big lens, it is much bigger and heavier than the 11mm. Now, Viltrox does have a 20mm lens that I always tell people to go get because it's like $150. This is a full frame 20mm lens. But if you're using dynamic active stabilization, it does crop in a fair bit, so I like to use this lens with the gyro stabilization. Now, there is one 16mm f1.8 full frame, and that is from Viltrox as well, but it's a metal lens. It's kind of big and heavy, so I don't really love taking that around for vlogging, but that will certainly give you a lot of background separation. And you can use this with dynamic active stabilization. You just need to have a muscular shoulder. Oh, and when you're outside vlogging like I was, I find there are 2 essentials. Get yourself a nice little tripod. I love this one because it's comfortable to hold and it has that quick release button, so I can just pack it up. Want to put it down, boom, there you go. That one is from Ulanzi, not that expensive, and you also need a variable ND filter. If you're going to shoot out in the sun and you want some of that background separation, then there you go. I will link below the one that I use. Now, a lot of people have talked about the overheating, especially when it comes to the ZV-E1. Now, I can't tell you what is happening in the conditions where you are, but I can tell you about my tests and what happens to me here in my environment. So normally when I'm in the studio, I have a controlled environment. It is about 73 degrees Fahrenheit or 23 degrees Celsius. And I have the cameras with the internal temperature set to high on a tripod with the screen open. And I don't have any overheating issues in 4K 24. So if I am shooting these cameras for an hour, hour and a half, I don't have any overheating, including on the ZV-E1. Now, if you are in warmer conditions, your results may vary, but this will definitely overheat if you are shooting 4K 60 for longer than, say, 25 minutes. And if you shoot 4K 120, you'll get some overheating probably after about 10 or 12 minutes, which is plenty for me. For what I do, 4K 120, I don't shoot for more than a couple of minutes of 4K 120, and I don't shoot 4K 60 for long stretches. But if you do, this is not the camera for you. The other place that this this camera will overheat is when it comes to streaming USB-C. So if you stream in 4K USB-C like I like to do, this will overheat after about 30 minutes. That's why I always have another product from Ulanzi, this little fan right here. I stick this fan on the back of this camera and it just goes in spring-loaded. Let me show you. You just click it right in to the camera just like that, and then you're done. And this thing, you turn it on and it doesn't overheat on me. I've streamed for 3 hours with this camera with that little fan connected to USB-C power, and it just goes and goes. The ZV-E10 Mark II does much better with overheating than this camera. Like I said, 4K 24, no problem for either of them, but I can usually shoot for about an hour of 4K 60, 10-bit 422 with this bad boy right here. And when it comes to streaming, I usually stream for at least an hour before I get an overheat warning on this camera. Once again, though, I attach this Ulanzi fan here because I don't ever want to have an overheating issue while I'm streaming 4K 30 frames per second from the USB-C. Honestly, if you're filming weddings out in the blistering sun, don't get one of these two cameras. Get something like an FX30 or an FX3 that has a fan built inside, plus they have 2 card slots for redundant recording, and those would be better for those professional environments. But for content creators, I really don't see much of an issue, certainly for me, with overheating. Never bothers me, like I said, except streaming, and then there you go. Now, I mentioned the 4K 120 on this guy. This guy does shoot 4K 120 at a small 1.1 times crop. It shoots 4K 60 at no crop at all, whereas the ZV-E10 Mark II, it shoots 4K 60 at a 1.1 times crop and does not shoot 4K 120 at all. That is really too bad. I wish it could do that, but it doesn't shoot 4K 120 at all. If you want 4K 120 in an APS-C camera for Sony, you have to get the FX30 or the A6700. So of course that's a major advantage for the ZV-E1 if you like to shoot that buttery slow motion. Something else the ZV-E1 has that the ZV-E10 Mark II does not have, it's the AI chip. So this has a dedicated AI chip inside, which makes its autofocus even more robust. So it has more subject detection. It can detect things like insects and trains and planes and all kinds of things, whereas this guy doesn't have the AI chip. The autofocus is amazing, and it never loses you if you are a person or an animal, but it doesn't have as many features, as many subject detection as this guy. And the AI chip also enables some cool functions like auto framing. Let me show you that. If you're like me and you have no friends, coworkers, or anyone that can stand to be around you for more than a few minutes, the ZV-E1 has you covered. I'm using the auto framing right now. It just crops in a little bit on your image and adds a little bit of dynamic movement to your shots. I've been really liking this for my reviews lately because instead of just a standard tripod shot, I have something in there, just a little bit of movement, helps up the audience retention, you know, give me some of that Google AdSense. So that AI detection gives you that auto framing where it can follow you around like you have your own cameraman. It also has another mode where you can actually keep the subject in the center of the frame as you move the camera, or you can do that manually. And say you want to do rule of thirds, you could put somebody in the rule of thirds, click on it, and then it will keep it in there as you're moving your camera, which can be very advantageous as well. And that one is called Framing Stabilizer. With rolling shutter, we have another advantage for the ZV-E1. The ZV-E10 Mark II is actually pretty good with the rolling shutter, especially when you consider the previous little Dougie here, the ZV-E10 original. Boy, his rolling shutter is terrible. It is stuff of legend, but the ZV-E10 Mark II, like the A6700 and the FX30, I'm pointing at the A6700 off screen right now. You can't see that, but the rolling shutter is quite good. It is somewhere between the ZV-E1 and something like an A7C II. It is good, but nothing compares to the ZV-E1 because it's the same as the FX3 and the A7S III, which is best in class. Now, something else you're going to get when you spend those extra dollars on the ZV-E1 is amazing low light performance, like bonkers low light performance. The ZV-E10 Mark II has really good low light performance, especially for an APS-C camera. In S-Log3, you have dual base ISOs of 800, 2500. Sony doesn't advertise that, but I tested it. It's the same as the FX30 at 800, and then it switches over at 2500 and cleans up. But the dual base ISO over here is 640 and 12,800. That is so crazy. If you're in a really low light environment, or say you want to shoot 4K 120 at a shutter speed of 1/250, then you can just switch it over to 12,800 and the image is so crisp and clean. I use that so often you wouldn't believe. But what about the advantages of the ZV-E10 Mark II? And it does have a few over the ZV-E1. The first one is the size. It is a smaller, lighter weight body, about 100 grams lighter than this already lightweight ZV-E1. But when you factor in the lenses, as I talked about, you can get so many small, lightweight APS-C lenses. Your kit can be much, much lighter, and it'll save your back walking around. It is nice to have small, lightweight cameras and lenses. And we'll stay with lenses. That is an advantage for this guy, because the ZV-E1, probably you should only do full frame glass with this. It has 12 megapixels, so if you want to put on an APS-C lens, it can't stay in 4K and go into APS-C mode, whereas this guy can take full frame lenses and APS-C lenses. And some of these APS-C lenses are smaller, lighter, and cheaper. Also, you can get wider lenses easier for this guy. Like I said, 11 millimeters f1.8. Really hard to find the equivalent to that on this camera. The closest is, as I mentioned, this Viltrox 16 millimeter f1.8, much larger, much heavier. The ZV-E10 II has more megapixels, so if you want to take photos, and both of these cameras are capable of taking very nice photos, you can crop and zoom in a little more with this, with the 26 megapixels as opposed to the 12 megapixels, especially if you are going to print large. Now, of course, everyone should realize neither of these cameras have mechanical shutter, so you do have the possibility of rolling shutter. You will get bends in your lines in golf swings, or somebody taking a slap shot in hockey. You might see the stick curving when you are using electronic shutter, especially in the ZV-E10 Mark II, because its readout speed is slower than the ZV-E1, so you will notice that rolling shutter more. And you can get banding, you can get those little streaks in light. If you are in mixed lighting environments and you're shooting, it's a wedding and or a concert, and there's all kinds of different lights flickering at different frequencies, you may see banding with your electronic shutter with both of these cameras. I wouldn't consider these pro photography cameras because they lack that mechanical shutter, but certainly you can still take fantastic images with these cameras. You just have to be careful of the banding and the rolling shutter. The overheating that was mentioned, that has got to go in the plus column for the ZV-E10 Mark II. It just does a better job in 4K 60. It does a better job with streaming, and if you are in a hot environment, then it's going to last a bit longer than the ZV-E1. And of course, a giant advantage for the ZV-E10 Mark II is the price. This one is $2,200 when it is full price, and this one is $1,100 when it is full price. And when you factor in the cheaper lenses that you can often get for the ZV-E10 Mark II, there are going to be some substantial savings right there. So honestly, I could not recommend these cameras more highly. I absolutely love them. I use them on a daily basis, and everyone I know that gets one of these two cameras also really, really loves them. Maybe not to the obsessive level that I love them, but people do love them. Let me know down below if you've tried either of these cameras, if you own one, if you're thinking about buying one, and we'll have a nice little discussion about it. Hey, thanks for watching this. We'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.